assistant off to the side. Thanks for tuning in to today's live stream. We're going to do something a little different. There are a couple of questions about me, so I thought I'd take this time to to answer them and what I'm about. I guess one of the questions people ask is, what got me into medicine? And it's kind of a roundabout story. In my youth, when I was at uni, I was actually doing a maths degree and a maths graduate degree. And one of my professor's husbands was a doctor, a medical doctor. And as you do, you get to meet become close with your advisors when you're doing a graduate degree. And this doctor, he was quite fascinating. He was obstetrician, he did emergency work. Part of his obstetrics, women patients, he did weight loss counseling. So it was interesting to see that we're going back a lot of years, 25, almost more years. But he watched me in math, and I was teaching big classes and lecturing and doing my thing. And essentially, I guess, with my maths degree, I was going to become, an actuary or something, statistical, who knows, whatever it is. But he actually took me aside and said, look, I see how you are with people and with patients. And he's like, I think you'll be wasted in maths. Clinically, you're brilliant. Of course, math, you're a genius. No. But I think it kind of touched, not a nerve, but just touched something in me that, he took me aside to go, you can be more. You can do more for people doing medicine. And so I actually looked into it. And my sister-in-law was going through med school at the time. And I thought, okay, this is going to be a lot more intense study, but is it less than a graduate degree? Medicine's pretty tough. But you know what? I decided to pursue medicine. And it turned out to be one of the best things, because the amount of interactions you have with people daily is it's amazing. And I guess one of the things about medicine is that you see people at their most vulnerable, and you have to not deal with that. You have to respect that. It's sort of an instant trust. The patient, you trust that when your doctor walks through the door, he's going to do the right thing for you. He's not going to try to screw you over or try to do whatever. He's going to look after you as if you were him or them or a family member. They're going to take care of you. They're going to help solve these problems. And I think it's a big trust. I came from sort of a military family, so service was a big part of that. And I think even my parents' love language was acts of service. So that's what I think spoke to me. And so, even just with the older people in our community and everything else, it was just serve. And, that felt like the right thing to do. And I think medicine plus that kind of just meshed together really well to kind of feed my soul. So this is a bit selfish why I became a doctor. I think, and I think that's why I don't regret changing from math. That's why I enjoy being a doctor for over 20 years, is that every time I meet a new patient, I'm able to make a difference in their life. And I think that's hopefully a positive difference in their life. It's not to say that everything has to have a positive outcome, because we know medicine isn't always successful and people do, but we can be there to support. And I don't know, it was a good fit. I guess one of the things that I feel has changed over time is medicine itself. There's been a pressure, like if you look at the government, they haven't increased GP rebates. Even some of the hospitals, private hospitals, they're increasing staff ratios, nursing to patient, doctor to patient ratios, making the teams more busy, trying to, cram more patients. And I feel that when people start to get rushed, or the numbers become too big that you're not allowed. It's not that you're not allowed, but you can't. You're not allowed to make that personal connection. I feel that really takes away from the art of healing. I think it takes away from the patient experience. And I think it kind of lessens the amount of care you can give. Not necessarily in a, hey, here's your diagnosis, here's your treatment, but more from a personal level. I like to have the time to make sure that my patients feel heard, their concerns are addressed. We have a plan that, even if things aren't going smoothly, what are we going to do next? And those things take time. And I feel that lately, the last, say, 5 years or whatever, there's been a big change like that. I think particularly going back to that doctor who got me interested, I remember the weight loss stuff back then, and back then it was more or less, calorie in, calorie out, which we know now, depends on those calories. There's now medications, there's now other stuff. But I think it goes back to then that, the information we had then came from doctor to patient, and it was evidence-based and backed. And I think in the weight loss industry now, what we see is we see influencers who are giving advice that may not be medically backed, or it may be backed on one little outlier and not actually apply to everyone else. Sure, it worked for that one person, but for 99% of everyone else. So I see that there's a lot of misinformation, not necessarily disinformation, but just perhaps misinformation, and maybe some of the other. I think as well that we see doctors who don't take the time to explain things in detail that patients need, because I feel when patients are informed, one, they can make the right decision for them. It doesn't have to be my decision, but at least when they have all the options and they're clear, they can make a choice that's based on facts. And I think when consults are rushed, they're not going to get all those facts. They're not going to get a chance to ask questions. And I thought that was something different that I could bring was, the thing that makes me me, I can bring to you or bring to my patients, and hopefully, build a relationship, because we know that weight loss is something long-term. We all know the information's out there. We can all find it. ChatGPT, other AI, you name it. You can find information, you can find facts, but what you need, I think, is someone to go, can you help this make more sense? Is this plan really legit? Hey, I've got 2 choices. What can you do? You know what? I'm having this other problem. Can you help me reconcile the two, or just listen? Or I have some questions that just aren't clear, and that's why I do the live stream. I think the live stream, which actually, let me make sure it's actually going. There we go. Sorry if I wasn't seeing your questions. And that's why I do the live stream, is to give everyone a chance to come and ask questions. You may not have time in that 6. Sorry about that. Should put my phone on mute. There we go. And that's what the live stream's here is. Come ask questions. Join. There we go. And that's why I feel that there needs to be a change in the weight loss industry. It's not that it's broken. I just think it can be done so much better and more personal, and we can have more satisfactory outcomes from not just a weight loss experience, but from the actual weight loss process. It's one thing to be just talked to for a couple of seconds and then shut down, but I think we got to start somewhere. I think as a doctor, I think it's a problem when no one explains how weight loss works exactly. Weight management, we know, is complex, and a lot of times it's oversimplified, and it leaves patients confused or just asking more questions. And then they don't have the time to get these questions answered. and so they become frustrated because it just doesn't feel right. And to a degree, what this does is, it makes healthcare feel like a transaction. So it's like, why does healthcare feel transactional instead of personal these days? And part of that's going to be the system pressures. It's shifting away focuses from relationships and towards efficiency, which patients feel that immediately. They know the doctor's not taking the time. I mean, think back in the day, doctors doing house calls, showing up at things. I mean, we're going way back, not too far back. But going to the GP and getting your questions answered versus now 6-minute consults, 10-minute consults. And as a doctor, I understand why people feel frustrated with the system. I feel frustrated with the system. Sorry, hi baby. I'll have to do it. Okay, let me just do the stream and I'll come to it later. Is that, use your school login. Georgia knows it, okay? Use your headphones. All right, can you close the door, please? Sorry about that. Where were we? Yeah, sorry. They pop it over there. There we go. So again, as a doctor, I understand why people feel frustrated with the system. That frustration comes from feeling rushed, unheard, left without answers, because that's how I feel sometimes when I'm trying to give my patients the answers and the time that they really need to. Thank you, baby. One more time. As a doctor, I understand why so many people feel frustrated with the system. That frustration comes from feeling rushed and unheard and just left without answers. And that's how I feel as a doctor, not having the time to make sure all that happens. And that's what makes me not feel right when I have consults that run that way, and I try not to. And sometimes the situation may not present itself to a short consult. Sometimes patients feel embarrassed to ask their doctor questions. When the timing feels right, or maybe even after some time, and when that point when patients worry they're feeling difficult, that might stop the communication. But if they don't have to stress, they don't have to worry, they will open up. They will ask the difficult questions, the embarrassing questions. And that's what I want patients to be able to do. That to go back to that time of trust and not worrying, and that's the important part. And I think when things get rushed, we're all human, so it's not just picking on people. The system does financially drive this, but I think having to do these short consults, as a doctor, I feel patients do feel judged, and as a doctor, I don't think a patient should feel judged in a consultation. It should be respectful, supportive, not intimidating or dismissive, all because I'm trying to get you out the door and get my next patient in, so I'm running on time. We all know doctors are chronically late. I mean, I think I called a patient early once and they thought they had the wrong day. That was, it was a day early. So it's, we try not to. Doctors do our best. So don't make it sound like we're horrible monsters. It's the way the system is kind of driving things, so that time can't be taken. And it's a time that doctors said, no more. Let's go back to when it was right, or it felt right. I guess when you think about the short consult, the short appointment, it almost is like, sometimes, it seems like, why are we treating the symptoms and not the underlying cause? That's partly going to be, there we go, sorry, we had a little lag over there. So I think these short appointments often lead to quick fixes rather than, deeper investigation into the whole about what's really going on. Not to say that doctors won't get there. It's that it will take multiple short appointments to collectively get everything together, because that's how the system has become. It's the government pressures, the government money. And as a doctor, I see this. This is exactly why healthcare issues keep coming back. We don't get the root cause addressed, and that same problem just repeats over time, particularly in weight loss. I mean, that's one of the areas where I'm guilty myself of my weight going up and down and up and down and up and down. We're not talking about the seasonal cold. We're talking, about the things that we have control over. Diabetes. We should really control our sugars. We know what we're supposed to do. We as people aren't quite the best. I'm not the best at, doing what's right for me all the time. Going for those long walks, making my 10,000 steps, drinking water. Let me do that right now. We don't want repetition. We want solutions. And as a patient, you deserve better care, and I genuinely believe that. I think patients deserve time and clarity and just proper guidance, not just rushed answers and the door. Doctor appointments should never feel rushed, especially when it's your health. And unfortunately, rush care has become the normal, and it shouldn't be. Quality care takes time, and that's what Teletrim is about. We want patients to feel heard. We want them to be informed and educated with the evidence. We want them to know that we're there with them, not there because of them, if that makes sense. I think it's just important that patients know there's a new way of doing medicine in town. We've got some questions. Good. Is it actually possible to deliver good care in a 6-minute appointment? Look, potentially, yes. Sometimes there are simple problems, and those require simple solutions. But it's not the way I like to do it. Sometimes it is, hey, let's go over these blood results. They're all normal. This is your normal health checkup. Perfect. I think where the 6-minute appointment fails is when we need to dig deeper, or we need to refer out, or, I think sometimes it's good to have a chat and talk about how you are, are you okay day? The number of times I've asked a patient, hey, are you okay? Or, a good one the other day, passing by one of my local coffee shops, and, I saw our local barista guy who, the kids and I are friendly with, and he just looked like he had an awful day. He was closing up a bit early, which is a bit strange. He had that look, and you all know that look when somebody has that look of just, you've had a horrible day. And I went in and I was just like, you look like you had a bad day, man. Do you need a hug? And, one, for men to say, hey, do you need a hug? That's, But you know what? He looked at me and he said, you know what? Batman, I do. And, we hugged, and he's like, you know what? I needed that. He's like, thank you. And I said, you know what? I needed to give you that because, oh God, I needed to give you that because I saw that you needed that. I saw that need. And that's how I like to, sorry. So I saw his need, and that's what I take from people. I see the need for being heard and being seen as a person. Just wanting them to leave, not necessarily better. We can't cure everything, but I want them to leave feeling that they had a good consult, that they didn't feel rushed, and didn't have time. And especially, if you circle back to weight loss, just because that's been in the news lately, and that's what we've been talking about, and that's the space I see needs the most reform, the most time, because there's so much bad news out there. I think that's the time and the place that people need to feel heard. They know what to do. They've got questions about it. There's medications. There's questions about it. What's going to work for me? There's questions about it. And those are the answers I have to give and want to give. We want to give at Teletrim. And Teletrim's, the reason I like it and the reason we kind of made it was so that we could find like-minded doctors like myself to help bring this together for patients to have better quality care. Hold on, we had another question. Give me a second. Okay. Back to the 6-minute question, or the 6-minute appointments. Are doctors aware how frustrating it feels to have a 6-minute appointment? I am totally aware of how frustrating it feels for a patient. I kind of aim for the 15-minute appointment because generally that's long enough to ask questions. But I try to give the patient the time that they need and not the time that they deserve. Or actually, the time they deserve as well, not the time that the government tells me I should give them. I think it's the time they need for good care and good medicine. That's what we're missing, and that's why Teletrim's different, because we're going to ask these longer. We're going to have these longer appointments. We're going to take the time that we need for you to be heard, to be sure, to feel supported. Come to the live stream, ask questions. We're here. We're going to be here every day around 5:10 because doctors run late. Around 5:10, and we're going to answer questions. So and if you don't get me today, get me tomorrow. Get me the next day. And why does the system? So somebody followed up with, why does the system still work like this if everyone hates it? It's the government. It's money. I mean, money drives everything. But the government is the one who's going, well, we don't need to put money into healthcare. We're going to try all these things rather than listening to what you exactly want. And when I was out doing GP work, I mean, that's what I found was, you can either have the time but not have enough money to run your practice, pay your staff to keep the lights on, or have to charge a bit more money and then risk not having some patients come because they can't afford it, or make shorter consults so that there's a balance in between. People are trying to change the system, and that's what we're trying to do. Is we're trying to change the system so that we can find something that doctors love and patients love, and make it work together. No, I'm kidding. I don't know why I did that. Just my kids. All right. How do patients tell the difference between being efficient versus being rushed? I think patients can tell exactly the difference. I think a patient knows that a doctor who's just switched on listens and goes, okay, you've told me this, this, and this. They can repeat it back to you, so they close that communication and gone, hey, I've heard these things, and because you said this, I think ABC. And then they give you a chance to go, oh, okay, what's B? That's medicine in a nutshell. Is research. Look for a research or get your info, form a diagnosis, get more info, refine that diagnosis, and going until you get the answer. And I think you can do that efficiently. You met those smart guys. I went to med school with those guys, smarter than me, and they let me study with them. I don't know if that puts me in the smart group or the slow buffalo, but the efficient doctor, the ones who are on point, and they're not trying to brush you off. They're trying to take what you say on point and use it to help form a diagnosis. Where the doctor who's rushed is, yes. Okay, you said this, and it's going to be this and this and this. Or here's this, here's a script. Okay, any questions, come back. So I think you can tell as a patient what's happening. As a doctor, I think the instant you set up a 6-minute consult, you know you're going to be rushed. You know you're going to be running late. I mean, even without doing 6-minute consults, because I don't, that's not me. I still leave a break in the day to get caught up because I know I'm going to be giving patients time. I'm going to be running a bit over. Please be patient with your doctor if they're running over. To that end, again, I try to listen. What should a patient do if they feel their doctor isn't really listening? Good question. Again, deep down, all doctors have an altruistic heart. Okay, so I think all doctors get into this with good intentions. So we've just got to remind them, hey, just ask your doctor, like, hey doc, can we just stop for a sec, and can we just summarize everything for me, because I got a little bit spaced out for a second, or you started doing medical jargon, or I felt, even you can just see and say, like, hey, look, I felt a bit rushed and I didn't take everything on board. Can we just stop and just summarize real quick so we're all on the same page? And I think most doctors will respect that. And if it's the third or fourth time you've had to tell them to stop and refresh, I think, they might get the hint, or you might just have to say, doc, you're really rushing. Let's just try to slow down, okay? My brain's just not as quick as yours. I haven't had my coffee this morning. You've had too much coffee this morning, doc. So, but we're humans. Just remind us. My kids often remind me when I'm perhaps not closing that loop of communication as well. So, is it okay to slow down the appointment and ask for more questions? Ask more questions. Definitely. It's definitely okay to ask more questions. Look, we don't want to turn, if you book a 15-minute slot for it, let's go GP land, because, we do have to try to have a timetable to make medicine equitable and try to see everyone and help everyone, because it is a finite resource. But, if you're not trying to turn, generally when you book, you try to book for one thing. And oftentimes the second thing pops up. And that's pretty fair to go, hey, look, we've got 2 things in this time frame. If we want to talk about more things, we just need to book in another time or do something. That's really reasonable for a doctor to do, because we want to make sure everyone has access to healthcare. I think when the doctor is trying to rush and do whatever, or even if they're not rushing on purpose, or even if they're Mr. Efficient and you're getting everything, and you do just need to be like, ooh, slow down a little bit. We're going 70 to 60. I think it is okay to just say, hey doc, can we just slow down for a second? And just, I find a good one for my patients is, if I get that way, I just say, just tell me to stop and summarize. Because one, it helps me focus back on the original problem. Also, it helps me think, okay, maybe I have been using too much medical jargon, or I've been talking in a way that's not clear. Australian isn't my first language, so it's okay to ask to slow down, and I think that's not a problem. Again, I think bringing up like 20 different problems in a 1-minute consult booking, as opposed to a long booking, that wouldn't pass the pub test, as they say here. Doctors feel the pressure, right? We feel the pressure of time. We don't want our next patient to be late. They've got work, they've got to pick up kids. All these things are running in our heads, and we do want to try to run on time. We do want to do what's best for our patients. And we do want to do the best for you too. So it's a constant juggle. So we're not all bad guys. You need to find a good guy, a superhero. No, you need to find someone who is trying to change the system, and that's what we're trying to do. What's a good one? Hold on. Let me. Here's a common one. This is a good one. Why do I only realize what I wanted to ask after I leave? Look, a lot of times we all get deer in the headlights, kangaroo in a headlight. We just the moment comes and it's our turn and a bit of anxiety comes up and we freeze and we forgot what we were coming to the doctor actually for, or we only remember a little bit of it, or, oh my God, I should have told him about this. Or, you know, it happens. It even happens to me when I go to the doctor. Even today with my daughter, you know, I was like, da 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 da, and she asked some questions, and then I was like, oh my God, forgot to tell you this, this, and this, and also this, this, and this, and we did, you know, doctor consults are quite interesting, doctor to doctor. You'd think it'd be efficient. Mine runs to, let's just try to help the doctor get out the door as fast as possible, or try to get to my solution as fast as possible. So I think when the doctor has the time, when the doctor takes the time, I think that gives you a chance for, you know, adrenaline rush. Hey, I got called in, yay! You know, that adrenaline rush to settle down. You know, your mind to settle down. You know, sometimes there's even worry about what are they going to find. You know, we can let that worry wind down. Is there going to be a needle? You know, let that fear wind down. And hopefully that will give you time to go, hey doc, I really came in today to ask about, you know, and sometimes, like we said earlier, is this an embarrassing question? Could this come up to something that you just not comfortable talking about with anyone, let alone your doctor? But you got to talk to someone, and you know, sometimes it can just be talking about other stuff until you feel comfortable, and hopefully, but you know, that's also when you want to ask something after you leave. That's why I do this live stream, is so that you go, I'm going to come to the chat and I'm going to ask a question. Hey doc, I forgot to ask you if I can still have Reese's peanut butter cups on a diet on my weight loss plan. And you know, the answer is yes. Just, you know, account for it, do whatever. You get, this isn't, you know, it's not a punishment. You know, it's a journey. Or you know, we all need a little reward. Now, don't eat 20 Reese's peanut butter cups, but you know, get the small one. You know what to do. You know what to do. But come to the live stream. Ask questions. That's what we're here for. If you forget what you wanted to ask after you leave, come to us. Speaking of, is it normal to Google everything after seeing a doctor? Yes. Chat GPT? Yes. Is it normal to Google while you're with the doctor? It's becoming pretty common. You know, people do it, or partners, or family members are over there. Oh, okay. So, and part of that, I think, helps empower patients because they feel more informed. If they're embarrassed to ask the doctor what something is, they can look it up first and go, oh, okay, I see. So if he has this medicine, can blank, what does that mean? Or what can he eat? Or, you know, what can we expect? Oh, can we expect this? And, you know, so I think it is normal to Google. It is normal to AI it. I think it's just part of information gathering. And I think that's partly why having the long consults is important, is because all those things can get addressed. And I think it's important to have the live stream because if you're embarrassed to ask those, or you look it up after, come ask. You know, that's what Teletrim's here for. Yeah. Let me see. I had some other stuff for us. Here we go. Squeeze this over here. I guess one of the things is, you know, when you do have to come back for an appointment, especially like in GP land or something, you know, sometimes that can take weeks. And why are patients waiting for weeks for just a 6-minute GP appointment? And a lot of times this is because clinics are overloaded. You know, they're trying to be bulk billing. They're trying to see as many patients as they can, partly because the need is there. And partly because the system, the government's making them prioritize volume over quality. And this doesn't leave time for good explanation or planning. And so it makes it hard. It makes it frustrating. It can make it feel why GP appointments are rushed. I mean, I guess here's one. I guess one of my relatives was telling me about. they said, I felt like my doctor wasn't actually listening to me. And, I do hear this from patients, not about me, because I talk all the time. They're just like, well, shut up. He's listening, but he just keeps talking. Is why do so many patients tell me they felt their doctor wasn't actually listening? Look, when appointments are rushed, sometimes the listening is sacrificed. Sometimes doctors will trigger on keywords and they won't understand the full picture. So their care becomes more reactive rather than thoughtful. Is this because of broken nights of sleep over all the years? No, it's because the system is really rushing us. And I think that's part of the problem is, people aren't trying to shortcut. They're not trying to, but, in a way they are trying to get to your solution as quickly as possible. And it's unfortunate because it's not done out of malice. It's just done out of almost necessity because of the way the system and the government and finances work. And the need. There's so many people who need doctors. So I think it's time to change the system, and that's what we're trying to do, is offer care, good quality care, being heard. And then the live stream gives you a chance to ask those questions you forget. Ask anything you want. It's good. I guess one of the tough ones that you see in GP, or you see in hospital, or you see wherever you see out there in medicine, is you get that it's probably nothing. And that is sometimes a valid answer. Sometimes we can't do anything about a cold, the common cold, or things like that. Or I think you can do that, but you have to have a plan in place to go, okay, well, if nothing becomes something, or nothing starts to get worse, there's got to be a plan in place. And I think patients have to be educated, have the time to be educated, ask questions, know about what is not nothing. Okay? And here's a good question. Why does "it's probably nothing" feel so unsatisfying? It's because when you go to the doctor, I'm not saying you want something to be wrong. When you go to the doctor, you want answers, okay? And sometimes that answer can be, it's not nothing, it's just that there's nothing needs to be done about it. And that's probably where I think the language is important, it's something to you because you came to me to tell me about it. Is this a funny little muscle twitch you had a month ago and have never had again? It did take weeks for you to get into your 6-minute consult with your other GP. Okay, sure. Your other doctor. But I think you go, okay, well, we have to be a little bit more realistic about that. But I think, again, if it was enough to bring you in, then, let's talk about it. Let's make sure that we understand the reasoning, why you came in. Is this little muscle twitch really masking something else? Like, oh, I had blood in my stool. Something that you're afraid to talk about. Hemorrhoid. What is it that, this little thing that's probably nothing? And again, some things don't need treatment, but they need answers. They need proper education. They need to feel heard. How can patients explain why something worries them without sounding anxious? Us as doctors are emotionless robots or emotionless skeletons like Charlie. So just tell us. No. I am your doctor. Sorry, I just needed time to think. Look, I have kids, so, everything is either 0 or 100 at times, and usually in a high screech. So I'm anxious doesn't sound anxious to me. No, it does. I think part of the thing is giving patients the time to collect themselves and get to a point where they can actually talk about what worries them. You know, a lot of times in a consult, you know, I'll spend the first little bit like, you know, hey John, hey Nancy, how are your family? You know, how are things going? How's work? You know, stuff that's not quite medical, you know, might play a part. You know, just to kind of break the ice, chit chat. I love hearing about people. I think one of the things about GP work is that you do get to almost become part of a family after enough time. You know, these people who are young are having children, you're seeing the children, they might be becoming grandparents, you know, and you're along with that journey. And that part, I think that's partly what appeals to a lot of doctors, is that you get to be invited on this journey, and we care. And I think that's the part of medicine that the system is slowly kind of crushing out of you, is that we don't get the time to connect as much as we did in the past. You know, it's the kind of superficial. How was the weather? Yes, good day, good day. Any good coffee? You know, I think you got to give patients time so that they can get to a point where they don't sound anxious. I think another thing I often tell my patients is whenever they have a medical condition or something at home, just take a sheet of paper. I don't know when you use paper. You can use your pen, your phone, whatever, record a voice thing. But jot it down. I'm like, always, you know, the best thing you can do is keep a little diary of symptoms. You know, headaches. I had a headache on this day. I ate this food on that day. I had no sleep on that day. You know, something about what was that day in particular. But, you know, even just having something that's a trend, or, you know, any other problems of why you're going to come see me about something. Because we know it's going to take weeks, or if you're lucky, you can get a same day appointment, you know, at your GP, or, you know, come to the live stream and just be like, I meant to ask this question to my doctor, but you know, hey, weight loss man is cool, okay, you know. So I think having things written down, or even just before you come in, just try to write your thoughts out. Because again, when you get in there, we all start to breathe, we all get a bit anxious, and then we forget, or, you know, we just, okay, I can't do it. You know, we chicken out. It's like trying to jump off the high bridge. So I think jotting things down, you know, beforehand is really good technique to do it, or recording it into your phone, listening before you go, or even just playing it for your doctor. You're like, oh my God, I hate the sound of my voice. Oh, the doctor on the live stream hates his voice too. You know, we're a match made in medical heaven. I think that's one of the ways to get over that hump. And honestly, usually once the can of worms is open, patients often just start spilling out all sorts of information. So I think that's a way to go. I realize I've been talking nonstop, guys. Thank you for asking questions, everyone. I'll be back tomorrow around 5, which really means 5:10 in doctor speak, so 5:10. And thanks for joining the Teletrim live